Let's speak to Dominic Walsh, who's a policy analyst from the think tank Open Europe. Good to have you with me here in the studio. The Prime Minister trying to rally her cabinet behind her, but this massive sticking point which has brought talks to a halt is this issue over the Irish border. Is that something that's going to be resolved by tomorrow?
I don't think it's going to be resolved by tomorrow, no. I think any chance of it being resolved by tomorrow died over the weekend when there was a technical agreement between EU and UK officials on some of the details of the Northern Irish border, but this was vetoed at political level by UK Brexit Secretary Dominic. But that's not to say that there won't be a deal on the Irish border at all. I think it's more likely now that any deal will actually be put into place either at the next summit in November or possibly even in December.
But do you think they're going to go for her plan, which is to have the whole of the UK aligned with the EU customs union for a limited time period beyond 2020? That is what a lot of her very pro-Brexiteer ministers don't like.
Yes, I think it's very difficult for Theresa May because essentially she has to come up with a plan which will not only be negotiable with the EU but can also be accepted by her cabinet and also by Parliament. On the question of the border backstop being temporary, the EU essentially is happy for the backstop to be temporary in theory, but what it doesn't and cannot accept is for there to be a hard time limit to the backstop, because essentially its argument is that a backstop with a time limit is no backstop at all. But back home, the Brexiteers in Parliament take the view that if there isn't a hard time limit, then that effectively amounts to the UK being permanently trapped in the EU's customs union without an escape route. And whether Theresa May can find a way to square the circle and somehow formulate a backstop which is in some way temporary but without a hard finishing date, that remains to be seen.
Well, I mean, that sounds like some miraculous solution. And the problem is that we are now into the final stages of negotiation. Do you think we're going to see a summit in November, which was supposed to be the next timestamp?
I think there's going to have to be a summit in November because fundamentally it's very unlikely that there's going to be a deal tomorrow. There'll be lots of rhetoric and noise, and there may be some movement in the right direction which will facilitate the conclusion of a deal in November. But fundamentally, there's also been discussion that November might become a no-deal summit, but I think at this stage that's still unlikely. I think that given...
Do you think there will be a deal? Because listening to people like Donald Tusk and Jean-Claude Juncker, EU officials seem to be preparing more and more for a no-deal scenario.
I think that preparing for no deal doesn't mean that no deal is going to happen. I certainly think that the prospect of no deal has become more likely in recent months, but that doesn't mean it's the most likely eventuality for here. But fundamentally, if there's going to be a deal, there needs to be movement from the EU on the Irish backstop, because what it's currently proposed, which is for Northern Ireland to remain inside the EU's regulatory and customs area, but for the rest of the United Kingdom not to do so, that creates economic barriers within the United Kingdom, and that's unacceptable not only to the UK government but also to the Democratic Unionist Party, or DUP, whose MPs give Theresa May her majority.
Right. Dominic, very well explained. Thank you very much indeed for that. Dominic Walsh there.